Sometimes people ask me if scar tissue can remyelinate. A long time, I didn't think it could. Then over time, my thought process developed. That is until I felt it happen. And that moment changed everything. It wasn't a miracle overnight. It was a slow, rhythmic return, like my body remembered a language it had once forgotten. I'm gonna go back for a moment. Before any of this repair, before the momentum, before the flushes, the potassium, the iodine, back to the early years, the part nobody ever sees. I was woefully unprepared for a progressive disease. If you've ever felt lost at the beginning of your MS journey, this part will feel familiar for a progressive disease. It's not like I didn't try everything. I did. But nothing pointed forward. There was no playbook, no guidance, no roadmap. Just fear. A fear that didn't have a known resolution. I didn't know what to expect the next day. I didn't know how bad it would get. Those years, 2004 to 2012, were the darkest part of my MS. And if you've ever wondered why early MS feels like a free fall, this might explain it. By 2008 to 2012, I would say probably was my lowest. Sleeping half the day, insomnia all night. I was barely active, depressed, lost. Nobody could help me. That's the world I lived in for years. The only thing I could do was read. I kept reading research articles, hoping something would be the answer. If you've ever searched endlessly for hope, you'll understand where I was. Hoping something would be the answer. Every few months, a new drug would pop up. Something really promising. Something people whispered might restore function. I remember one was Ampera. I don't even remember what year it was. But that was like, in my mind, I was like, oh, this might be it. But then real life played out differently. It just ended up being another drug with mild effects, benefits. Another door that barely opened, then shut. It wasn't like my life was horrible. I laughed a lot. I had good days. My career was strong. But MS was the thing in the back of my mind, always. Haunting me, limiting me, shrinking my world. And the symptoms were constant. Every day, every hour, every minute. Not improving, not stabilizing, just slowly, quietly declining. A silent era of slipping downhill without knowing how far it would go. During the day, I pushed it all away. I didn't think about MS constantly. I couldn't. I'd just bury it. But at night, hours lying in bed, unable to sleep, that's when the fear showed itself. And I would constantly think, is this it for me? Is this the rest of my life? Oddly enough, the thing that got me through some of those years was a TV show. So You Think You Can Dance? I don't know. Maybe because I was so disabled. Maybe watching people move in ways I couldn't even fathom gave me something to hold on to. A world where movement was still beautiful, still possible. Somewhere in those long nights, I became obsessed with PubMed articles, cytokines, inflammation, the immune system, exercise, always exercise, keep showing up. I tried joining a gym. It didn't stick. I felt uncomfortable around other people. I was too disabled, too slow, too different. I felt everyone watching me. So I trained at home instead. Old dumbbells, a rowing machine in the basement. I wasn't consistent, but I tried to be. MS sometimes made me not, but it was something. Then in 2013, everything changed. I found the Bowflex Revolution. I found it online. I didn't know it then, but that machine was the beginning of my turnaround. The great Steve turnaround. Stay with me here, because everything from this point forward comes the turning point in how MS actually heals.
It was a slow, rhythmic return, like a body remembered a language it had once forgotten.
And for me, that right condition didn't come from a pill or procedure. It came from understanding the timing of recovery, from realizing that rest wasn't weakness, it was when the repair actually happened. It took years for that whole concept to sink in.
Scar tissue in the brain isn't the end of the story. And here's the first big rehook. This part matters more than any MRI ever could. It's part of a cycle, a loop of damage, clearance, and repair. Every time an immune flare cools down, the body begins another attempt at rebuilding. The nervous system is persistent. Even after years of quiet inflammation, it still waits for the right conditions to repair itself.
In my case, once I finally discovered the things that worked, and most of them only in the past year, my nervous system started to wake up. Weightlifting set it all off.
That's the irony of MS recovery. It often begins when you stop fighting the symptoms and start aligning with the body's natural cycles. The immune system has two speeds, destruction and repair. And those same cells that once caused damage, microglia and macrophages, can become your allies when the environment changes.
Then it was UVB light, sleep, and as I just said, niacin, potassium, iodine. Every piece of it started sinking together, and I started to feel something different. Like energy was moving through the places that used to be silent. That's what I call the cycle of repair. That meaning giving my nervous system what it needed to wake up. Every piece of it started sinking together. And it's been joyous. I started to feel different. Like energy was moving through places that used to be silent. That's what I call the cycle of repair.
Let's break that cycle down. And here's why so many people get stuck in the middle of recovery without knowing it. First comes inflammation, when the immune system responds to myelin injury. Then comes clearance, microglia and macrophages clean up the debris. Next, activation, oligodendrocyte precursor cells, OPCs, sends chemical signals that it's time to rebuild. Finally, remyelination, new insulation forms, restoring conductivity. But for many people, that cycle gets stuck at the clearance stage.
And that's exactly what happened to me for years. I couldn't stop new damage. But I couldn't restart repair either. It felt like hitting pause on a broken movie. The same frame, frozen for years. I had stability, but no progress forward. That's what living with scar tissue feels like. If you're watching this right now and thinking, but how does this apply to me? Stay with me. This is where the biology starts to bend back in your favor. You stop the fire, but the building never gets rebuilt.
That's where blood flow and nutrient availability come in. When circulation is restricted by stress, inactivity, or even caffeine, the debris just lingers. But when you restore flow, everything changes. Microglial switch from inflammatory to regenerative. They digest old debris instead of attacking new tissue. That cleanup unlocks the repair phase.
That's exactly what I felt after starting an niacin. It was like a switch flipped in my head. I remember the first flush vividly, scared to death, heat, tingling, then calm. As I drove to the ER. But over time, that flush started to feel like my cells were breathing again. The more I trained, the more I flushed, the better I moved. It wasn't placebo. It was progress, real progress.
And here's the part most people never hear. This single shift can reopen a repair pathway that's been dormant for years.
And I think that was the missing link. I didn't realize how long I'd been living in a partial recovery. Stronger, yes, but not whole. When the circulation came back, I noticed balance returning. The heaviness in my right leg began to lift. Not all the way, but it's so much better. My gait changed. Not overnight, but step by step, week by week. The whole right side of my body, once disconnected, was coming back online.
That's neuroplasticity at work. And if you've ever doubted that the nervous system can reroute, listen closely. Even where old lesions remain, new pathways form. Astrocytes, the cells that form scar tissue, don't just wall off damage. Over time, they can remodel and open channels that let new myelin weave through. It's not erasing the scar, it's building around it.
That's why I don't worry about what the MRI says anymore. For years, I lived by that report, those scans. It was like every new scan, a verdict on hope. But the truth is, repair happens long before a radiologist ever can see it. It's felt before it's seen. When your leg moves easier, when your hand steadies, when fatigue finally stops, those are the real scans that matter.
Exactly. MRIs show structure, not function. They can't measure signal efficiency or how neurons reroute around old scars. So while a radiologist might see stability, your nervous system could be undergoing massive functional rewiring. That's why lived experience often outpaces medical imaging.
And that's what I mean when I say the cycle finally closed. I stopped chasing. Stopped chasing the treatments and started rebuilding conditions. Better sleep, tight eating window, intense training, real rest. And when all those rhythms aligned, my body remembered how to heal. And it is shocking. And you'll feel it too. It was like all these separate experiments, diet, exercise, supplements, finally started speaking the same language.
That harmony is the essence of repair. Trigger inflammation, clear debris. Rebuild insulation, reinforce rhythm. And over time, that cycle becomes automatic, just like your heart learns to beat stronger after exercise. There's another layer to this story: energy. If fatigue has ever confused you, this next part will make sense of it. The kind that powers every neuron, every repair signal, every heartbeat. It comes from mitochondria, the powerhouses of the cell. When they're damaged, neurons can't maintain their electrical signals. But niacin, through NAD+, rebuilds that energy supply line. It fuels cleanup and repair simultaneously.
That explains so much. Because before any visible improvements, when I noticed, first was my stamina. Not muscular, cellular. My fatigue didn't vanish, it transformed. It became effort again, not collapse. That's when I knew something deep inside me was changing.
Exactly. When mitochondria recover, microglia calm down. Inflammatory molecules like TNF-alpha and IL-6 drop. ATP rises. Neurons stop firing erratically and start rebuilding predictably. It's like switching from chaos to rhythm. That's when the nervous system starts trusting itself again.
If you're wondering what this feels like in real life, here's where it becomes real. There's one day I'll never forget. Stay with me, because this moment shows what repair feels like in real life. The moment I knew recovery wasn't a theory, it was real. I was walking through the living room when my foot caught the corner of a rug. That always used to mean a fall. But this time, before I even thought about it, my leg kicked out and caught me. I stood there, stunned. I realized my body had reacted on its own. Reflexes that had existed for years had started to come back.
That's neuroplastic reflex integration. The cerebellum and motor cortex were communicating again. Fast reflex arcs that were once offline had reconnected. Moments like that are the nervous system's way of saying, I'm back. It's functional proof that remyelination has crossed the threshold from potential to performance.
I remember sitting down after that, trying to process it. For so long, every movement was deliberate, conscious, forced, and suddenly, it was instinct. That's when I knew the repair wasn't just happening. It had already happened. And if you've ever felt stuck, really stuck, this next part shows why that stuck phase isn't permanent. Looking back now, it's surreal. And here's the truth most people never hear. Once repair starts, it accelerates. I spent years waiting for another relapse, another MRI, another loss, but they never came. Instead, my energy rose. My mind cleared. My muscles responded again. And the more I trusted the process, the faster it seemed to accelerate. Because once you break that loop of damage, everything else follows. You just have to have courage.
There's a concept in neuroscience called experience-dependent repair. It means the nervous system learns from your habits. If you keep showing it balance, it rewires for balance. If you show it fatigue and fear, it learns those too. So the lifestyle around the biology becomes as important as the biology itself.
That's what I learned the hard way. When I was stuck, I was trying to think my way out of it. I wanted certainty, proof, a number to chase. But in actuality, recovery doesn't work that way. It's not linear, it's rhythmic. You earn it by building trust with your own biology.
That trust, biologically, shows up as homeostasis. Cortisol levels fall. Mitochondria regenerate. OPCs stop hesitating and begin differentiating into mature oligodendrocytes. Each of those changes adds up to what you feel as recovery. It's not magic. It's physics and chemistry working in harmony.
And now that I'm here, the meaning feels different. I used to think recovery was about getting back to who you were before. Now I see it about becoming who I was meant to be all along. If you've ever questioned whether identity can change after years of limitation, this next part is for you. The discipline, the calm, the compassion. They're side effects of healing, not goals.
Before we close, there's something important to understand about scar tissue without talking about scans, without talking about imaging, just the biology and the lived experience. Scar tissue in MS is mostly made by astrocytes, support cells that rush in after damage. They build a temporary framework to protect the tissue. It feels permanent, but it isn't. Over time, astrocytes soften. They reshape. They open pathways. They create space for new myelin to weave through. Scar tissue isn't a wall. It's scaffolding. Something meant to hold the structure together until repair can take over.
And that's exactly how it felt to me. The areas that once felt completely offline didn't suddenly snap back. There was no magical tingling, no warmth, no dramatic moment. Things just started working again. Slowly, quietly. One day you suddenly realize, wait, that used to be a problem for me. And now it isn't anymore. The wiring doesn't announce itself when it reconnects. It just whispers and works.
And that whisper is the nervous system reopening pathways that once seemed gone. Old lesion sites can sit dormant for years until the chemistry around them changes. Better circulation, lower inflammation, more energy inside neurons. OPCs finally gaining access. It's not about scar tissue disappearing. It's about scar tissue transforming. And in the right environment, it always tries.
Before we end, there's one more piece of the story that matters. Not just why repair happens, but why it fails for so many years. Repair doesn't stop because the body forgets how. It stopped because the environment becomes impossible to repair within. Chronic inflammation. It creates a backlog of debris. Microglia stay in attack mode instead of cleanup mode. Astrocytes harden instead of soften. Circulation stops. Mitochondria lose energy. OPCs go dormant. Cortisol always stays high. Sleep becomes shallow or non-existent. And the nervous system shifts into survival instead of restoration. None of this is a moral failure. None of it is a lack of discipline. It's biology responding to being overwhelmed. A system protecting itself the only way it knows how. That was me for years. Not because I wasn't trying, I was. It consumed my nights and days, but because the conditions for repair weren't there. My body wasn't broken. It was exhausted. It was inflamed. Stuck. Doing everything it could just to stay level. When you're in that place where I was, repair isn't even on the table. You're not building anything. You're holding on, barely. And if anything, taking a step back every once in a while. For years, that's exactly what I did. Try to hold on.
Repair begins the moment the body no longer feels like it's drowning, the moment inflammation calms, the moment circulation returns, the moment energy rises, the moment stress falls. Only then can microglia switch roles. Only then can OPCs wake up. Only then can astrocytes loosen their scaffolding. That's why repair feels slow, because the groundwork has to shift first. And once it does, things that were impossible become inevitable. That's when the body becomes ready to rebuild. And here's the rehook. The body is always trying to rebuild. The question is whether the environment allows it.
And that's why my recovery didn't start with movement. It started with rhythm. The right food, the right rest, the right timing, and finally, the right chemistry. When everything aligned, when repair finally began.
Exactly. Repair fails when the system is overwhelmed. Repair succeeds when the system feels safe. Your story shows that difference more clearly than any study ever could.
It's not about chasing health anymore. It's about protecting peace. And that's something I want everyone watching to know. Once you find your rhythm, protect it. Because that's where real recovery lives.
Exactly. Repair fails when the system is overwhelmed. Repair succeeds when the system feels safe. Your story shows that difference more clearly than any study ever could.
It's not about chasing health anymore. It's about protecting peace. And that's something I want everyone watching to know. Once you find your rhythm, protect it. Because that's where real recovery lives.
That's the quiet truth about long-term repair. It's not just tissue, it's temperament. The same biology that stabilizes your immune system stabilizes your emotions. When inflammation falls, clarity rises. The nervous system and the mind finally speak the same language again.
The proof that repair can happen is possible. For you, me, and for everyone who's fighting.
There's one last piece to this story, something quieter than biology, something slower than remyelination, identity. Long-term illness shapes identity in ways people don't talk about. When the nervous system is stuck, life becomes about limitation, what you can't do, what you fear, what tomorrow might take from you. Over time, those thoughts become a kind of second immune system, always on guard, always anticipating loss. But when the biology begins to repair, the psychology has to follow, slowly, carefully, like learning to live inside a body you had written off years earlier.
I'll admit, that was the hardest part. Not the exercise, not the diet, not the supplements, but accepting that I wasn't the person I used to be. I was someone stronger, calmer, wiser, Someone who had learned how to live in a body that finally started trusting itself again. It took time to let go of that version of me shaped by fear. The one who spent years protecting against decline. But at some point, I had to ask, what does life look like now when I'm not just living to survive it? And little by little, the answer showed up. In movement, in clarity, in confidence. Not all at once, but the same way remyelination happens, quietly and in the background, till one day you realize your entire life feels different.
That's the final stage of repair, not biology, not structure, identity. Your nervous system and your sense of self finally agreeing on the same story. It says, I am no longer broken. I am no longer afraid. I am no longer waiting.
And that's why I share this. Because the recovery isn't just physical, it's personal. It changes who you believe you are. And once that shifts, boom, everything shifts. Until the next one.